Ah, so you say you're indestructible unless one can perceive and harm your soul. But now, just how indestructible does that make you? What's up guys, Alphonso here, and here we are to do a breakdown and discussion on listing pretty much every single thing, character, ability, tranquility, permissibility can actually harm the curse of human nature, the embodiment of hatred itself, the monster, the beast, the demon of darkness, known as Mahito from Jujutsu Kaisen, specifically in universe. I could definitely go on for literal hours naming who knows how many characters could harm Mahito crossverse, because unfortunately, there are a lot of soul manipulators far without the bounds of JJK. It's just a more common ability, just in the same way that spatial manipulation is a much more common ability than one would think based on how it's portrayed in JJK. So I want to specifically focus on inverse and cover pretty much everything with hopefully not missing too many things, but we'll see, because I'm about to do what I do best, which is the very best I can. So let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. What's up guys, Alphonso here. Fun fact, I have it on me, and I keep it on me at all times. And fun fact, this could not harm Mahito. Unfortunately, this is but a regular blade, and thusly, it could not do anything to Mahito. In fact, these right here, they could not do anything to Mahito. While I may be able to physically punch him in the mouth before he simply one-taps me by literally one-tapping me and then turning me into a fish or something, any sort of regular physical damage just won't do anything to him. Mainly because of Mahito's biological structure. Or, is it biological? Is that the appropriate word when it comes to Mahito? I guess legally speaking, but like, he's a curse, so he doesn't have flesh. Can things have biological structures if they're not made of flesh? I don't know. Basically, how Mahito is built, how his body is constructed. You didn't see that. But basically how Mahito is built and how his body is constructed, it allows for him to pretty much ignore any damage that comes to his physical form, because the physical form doesn't really matter. Thanks to the nature of idle transfiguration, his curse technique, his fundamental visage is just that, a visage. He can make his shape be literally anything. He just commonly appears in his regular humanoid form. But his soul is what really matters. If you can hit that, that's how you damage Mahito. And there are issues with that for, I'd say, a hefty chunk of the verse, especially within the early series. Mainly because soul manipulation is very, very rare. That's why Mahito himself is so dangerous, and why Nanami Kento, an extremely powerful grade 1 sorcerer, simply upon encountering Mahito for the first time is like, now, wait a second here, Buckaroo. I'm not sure if we can really do all that. If we let this guy rock out for a little bit, he could become a threat beyond comprehension. And it's literally because of the soul invulnerability aspect. Now, there is a common theory that if you were to simply beat Mahito down enough to the point where he runs out of curse energy, simply because he is a curse, he would hypothetically perish. Because that's how all curses would perish. You run a person out of cursed energy, there's still the flesh there. You run something that's literally made out of cursed energy, and they poof. But for the sake of this video, I will not be entertaining that. I'm just gonna pretend that that does not matter. I can see the arguments for it, and it's basically how you argue Mahito can perish cross-verse. Like, if you don't do that, characters like Shigaraki from My Hero Academia, who are leagues upon leagues upon leagues more powerful than anything Mahito has to offer, could just literally never beat him. Like, Mahito could just stand there forever if you believe that, oh, well, Shigaraki can't harm the soul, never shown the ability to, so thusly can't do it. Same thing for a character like, I was about to say Sora, but he's interacted with hearts, which are kind of souls, but not really. So, like, essentially, Mahito being beat down, that's something for another time. We're specifically looking for things inverse that can attack the soul so they can specifically deal with Mahito in relatively short order. Mahito is a special grade curse, meaning he has an excess amount of curse energy, so even if you were to simply punch him ad infinitum to where you finally ran him down of curse energy and that did magically manage to exercise him, and you probably wasted a good solid, like, 20 minutes. Let's be generous to some of the stronger characters and say it takes 20 minutes for them to do that. Now, I want something that can do instant damage to Mahito's soul immediately. And of course, we gotta cover the man, the myth, the legend who taught us that Mahito can be damaged at all, Yuji Itadori. Now, it is very questionable on whether or not Yuji can still do what he does now that he is liberated Yuji and not possessed Yuji. Because remember, the main reason that Yuji Itadori was a natural and mortal enemy to Mahito was due to the fact that he was infused with the curse of 1,000 years past, Ryomen Sukuna. I know he's not actually a curse, but like, he's called a curse in reference to his cursed object status. Please, Sukuna fans, don't hurt me. But with that being the case, Yuji is very specifically able to damage Mahito and just beat him down because of the fact that he has Sukuna inside him and he is naturally, literally entirely subconsciously. Yuji never actually specifically learns how to do this. I'm not sure. Does anyone ever tell Yuji that he can do that? I actually have no idea. I need to double check that. I don't think anyone actually tells Yuji. It's just that Mahito takes damage. He's like, oh, this guy's an issue now. But Yuji doesn't know that he does that. He has literally no idea. Simply suppressing Sukuna's soul inside of him due to his nature as whatever he is, that's a story for another video, he's able to damage Mahito with literally everything he does. The only things that may not be able to damage Mahito is like things that Liberated Yuji does. Like maybe picking up like a slab of concrete and slamming it into Mahito probably wouldn't do anything unless Yuji literally infuses his curse energy that has the concept of the dual soul thing attacking Mahito. Personally, I believe he can still damage Mahito even now, and the reason that is because he's likely not going to forget how to do that, and one of the biggest things that was established before the recent events in the manga is that Yuji is literally studying the soul. The soul is something that is understood and reflected upon and even studied by characters like Yuki Tsukumo, so soul interaction, considering Yuji's been able to do it for the entire series, and it seems like it's going to be a big thing in the battle against Sukuna himself, yes, I'm going to assume that Yuji Itadori, even to this day, could just because he has the means and methods. If you don't think that, that's entirely fine. Then just take an earlier Yuji, take Yuji right before he's liberated, and he could still damage Mahito. Admittedly, it would still take a while because it is still, but still, I think it's more feasible that Yuji Itadori could harm Mahito. Another character who can harm Mahito, though admittedly, only, I don't know, this one's weird. Ryomen Sukuna. Now you may be wondering, like, well, pencil-wise, it's weird. We literally see Mahito shiver in his boots at like 3 fingers of Sukuna chilling inside Itadori. The reason I say it's weird and somewhat questionable whether or not Sukuna can do it is like, well, actually, no. Current Sukuna could do it just fine. The Sukuna that's in Megumi's body could do it just fine. Same reason that Yuji can. Simply because he contains another soul within him, which is Megumi Fushiguro, no matter how brain damaged that soul is. Soul damage? What is Megumi's situation? He was hit by multiple limited voids. So, like, is his soul overloaded with information? I honestly have no idea how that works. Maybe Megumi can come back. Because if it's just his soul, but the brain is... I have no idea. But we do know Sukuna is in a very similar situation to where he can just... This means that any incarnation of Sukuna that's in a dual vessel, aka Megumi's body, Itadori's body, or any vessel he happens to undertake that happens to contain another soul, yes, Sukuna could directly harm Mahito for the same reason that Yuji can, and even his very soul is strong enough to harm Mahito whenever Mahito attempts to directly interact with it. The only reason I'm questioning on whether someone like Heian era Sukuna could do something like that is because we only see Sukuna interact with Mahito under the very specific pretenses that Mahito opens the pathway to himself by touching Sukuna's soul. Every time he goes to do that, Sukuna's like, "Who do you think you are? Did you forget your place? Don't worry, I'll remind you." And he immediately, but like, we've seen things like Cleave and Dismantle be used on people before. The same thing that he presumably uses to damage Mahito, but they don't do soul damage because those can be healed. Meanwhile, soul damage from Mahito cannot be healed. Though, is soul damage from Mahito soul damage, or is it soul reformation? And that's like technically the state you end up in is the state your soul's supposed to be in, but your body breaks down. I don't know. But in a roundabout way, you can make an argument that original Heian era body Sukuna, due to the fact that he should, unless a massive plot twist is revealed, like the common theory that he ate his sibling, Unless it's magically revealed that he even had 2 souls way back then, Sukuna in his original form may not actually be able to harm Mahito. But every single Sukuna we see within the modern narrative would annihilate Mahito. Literally, we see the interactions whenever Mahito goes to interact, and we see that Sukuna is literally just Itadori and or Megami at the time, and thusly has the dual soul effect. Another thing that should be very capable of harming Mahito is, shockingly enough, anybody with a simple domain that's infused into something. This is weird, this is very, very strange, but it's revealed in the Ultimate Mechamaru fight that if you have something like Simple Domain, remember what Simple Domain does, it negates the effects of a curse technique within a very specific area. If something like a Simple Domain is launched at Mahito and embeds itself in him and then detonates, his soul will literally take damage. So Simple Domain users could technically harm him, but not, we don't know. That's the unfortunate thing about Mahito and his relatively early departure in the series. We simply do not know whether or not, like, someone like Todo, if he were to infuse his fists with the properties of Simple Domain in a similar way to Mechamaru did the canisters, could he harm Mahito? Considering he doesn't do it in the fight against Mahito, you would think not. But remember, Mechamaru didn't tell anybody how he fought Mahito or Kenjaku. He simply showed up in Shibuya as a little talking earpiece, and thusly he didn't have much time, nor energy, nor information to really give, outside of what information was pressing to the scenario. So it could be possible that if a Simple Domain user were to imbue their Simple Domain gooiness into their fists or their feet or whatever other part of their body you would like. I've seen some of you down dastardly Mahito fans. I know what you want to imbue Simple Domain into, so you can imbue something else into Mahito. Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it everywhere. You aren't subtle. But with that being the case, maybe Simple Domain users could do it. But the only reason I'm so iffy about that is because of how weird the Simple Domain being infused into that tube that has like a pointy part into a spear. It's such a weird thing, but I want to bring it up because it's one of the few things in the series that's actually revealed to be able to damage Mahito. So it is worth mentioning. Does that mean Simple Domain users can do it? I'm flip a coin on it. If you want to give characters like Todo a chance against Mahito, sure, but the likelihood of them knowing that and knowing how to do that is seemingly very, very low, considering Mahito does not do it. Another character who should be able to harm Mahito actually in multiple ways, and matching a subsect of another character who should be able to harm Mahito in less numerable ways, but still ways, is actually Toji Zenin. Now, this is a weird revelation to really think about, but thanks to the reveal of the Soul Split Katana, Maki and Toji can perceive souls even in inanimate objects. Now, if you're like me, you have absolutely no idea what that means. It's like, for example, does this have a soul within the context of JJK? What does it do? Is it conscious? I have no idea, but it has a soul, and Toji and Maki can see souls. And we know that if someone who can subconsciously see the natures of souls directly interact with and manipulate and damage Mahito in the case of Yuji Itadori, someone who doesn't even know what he's doing, it's very likely that people who can actively perceive the souls in things as innocuous as inanimate objects could very likely just beat Mahito up. Am I saying that I believe that Toji and Maki could just beat down Mahito? Yes, ironically enough, with the understanding that in order to use a very specific weapon that is also going to be mentioned as super effective on Mahito, they need to be able to perceive souls, and we know the way you damage Mahito is being able to perceive the contours of the soul. This is established as early as Mahito's first major fight against Itadori, someone who subconsciously does it. Toji and Maki actively do it. They could literally beat him out of existence. However, if you do not like that, because it seems a little bit too vague, like, sure, inanimate object, but Mahito's not an inanimate object. Obviously, he can't. No matter what, there's no way bro could have his soul perceived. Both Toji and Maki very specifically have 2 of the tools. In fact, dare I say, are they the only tools? Most likely. I'd say they're the only tools in the entire series that could actually damage Mahito. Number 1, the less known one, we're going to get to the more known one in a second, the Inverted Spear of Heaven. This has very similar properties to the Simple Domain Poke that Mechamaru uses on Mahito to damage his soul. The Inverted Spear of Heaven turns off curse techniques. And remember, Mahito's invulnerability is not just like a natural part of him. He needs his curse technique for that. That's why when Simple Domain activates on him, suddenly that invulnerability doesn't matter and his soul takes damage. So the Inverted Spear of Heaven, if used to chop off Mahito's arm, would turn off the Edo Transfiguration, and the shape of this soul that allows Mahito to have an arm would be chopped off as well, and Mahito would look on in terror as he realizes he cannot casually regrow that arm and now needs to reshape his soul. So something as innocuous as a tiny little spear would just... and then Mahito's turn into fine sushi. But if you don't like that idea, once again going by the idea that, oh, well, you know, it turns off cursed techniques, but maybe it doesn't work exactly the same as Simple Domain, the Soul Split Katana. The Soul Split Katana. The Soul Split... Is there any other way to say katana? Katana? I have no idea. But with that being the case, the Soul Split Katana, I don't own that yet. I'll find a way. But regardless, the Soul Split Katana would simply... and then Mahito would be in half. And I don't think he'd be able to recover. Mainly because remember what the Soul Split Katana does. It ignores all conventional durability. By the statement of Maki and Toji being able to perceive the souls of inanimate objects is so important, and that's why the ability is locked behind Katana that allows them to attack straight at the soul. And if they can attack straight at the soul, guess who's not living? How long would it take, per se, for Mahito to fall to something like the SSK? Would it simply be a slash straight across, and suddenly we consistently see reference for Mahito is a very weirdly shaped little object? So if Maki and Toji were to just start swinging wildly, would they hit the soul naturally? The Soul Split Katana with the appropriate user is in fact able to just turn off Mahito by directly attacking the thing that makes him nigh on invulnerable. Now, I've covered a whole bunch, but Jackpot Akari. Oh yeah. Shouldn't be able to harm him at all. Like legitimately, he could punch Mahito for days on end. And considering Mahito's massive cursed energy reserves, presumably Hakari would just get bored. Main reason why? He doesn't have a second soul in him. It's rough stuff. And also, he doesn't have anything that implies that he can perceive souls, has some sort of subconscious understanding of them, that he read Yuki's book. Nothing. So thusly, despite him being arguably one of the most powerful characters in the series, what many people commonly agree to be top 10 at the bare minimum when in Jackpot, he likely wouldn't be able to do much of anything to Mahito, except maybe go with the original idea of beating him down extensively and consistently spamming jackpots to avoid getting, you know... Though admittedly, it would probably be very, very hard for Mahito to transfigure someone like Hakari, even in base, which is a weird thing. Once again, we're just talking about those who can harm Mahito, not Mahito in an actual fight with these individuals. That's an entirely different story that may be being prepared for another video, and the reason I'm making this video is so I can reference back how the certain events of other videos may go in one sort of comprehensive place. But regardless, someone like Hakari wouldn't be able to damage him due to the nature of soul stuff. A weird thing? Here's the thing, right? Do Gojo's attacks hit the soul? I know this seems like such a weird question. Like, come on now. Pencil, you're telling me the second strongest character in the entire verse can't directly attack Mahito's soul? Come on, Pencil, you gotta be messing with. But like, sure, he could very likely just atomize Mahito. He could probably, I don't think Mahito's surviving a purple. Don't get me wrong. But like, I don't think Gojo punches Mahito to the ceasing of existence. I don't think that happens. Maybe even Reds probably wouldn't do all too much to Mahito. You would need something like purple that just atomizes him entirely. Like, that has to be the case, and has to cover all of Mahito's body. Because, technically, Gojo doesn't have a second soul, and as great as his understanding, and actually, wait a minute, he can see souls. He can see the contours of them. That is established in the Gojo vs. Sukuna fight with the Six Eyes. I take it back. Gojo can also beat Mahito up. Because the nature of the Six Eyes allows him to perceive souls. He very specifically identifies the sparks of the souls within Naguna when he's fighting him after he finally starts to, I hate to say it, but pay attention to what's actually going on inside Naguna's body using the Six Eyes. So it's very likely that if Gojo were to have landed those two punches that he whiffed on Mahito, yeah, he actually would have done some damage simply on the fact that he probably accidentally would have perceived Mahito's soul instead of Mahito himself. So Gojo, never mind. Add him back onto the list. Man can literally do anything except beat Sukuna, unfortunately. But with that being the case, other weird characters that just I can't actually say weird, because there are a bunch of characters that now should legally be able to harm Mahito. Unironically, a character like Higuruma would be able to harm Mahito, but not in the direct way that you think. The reason Higuruma would be able to harm Mahito is simply because of the domain. If Mahito does not open domain and he actually gets trapped in Higuruma's, and we assume that curses can fall under the legal system of Japan. I know that seems like such a weird stretch, but it is important. If he can get Mahito convicted, which, has Mahito done anything that's not illegal? I feel like even the breaths he takes are illegal. Like, I think it would be so easy, and I think Mahito's dumb behind himself probably wouldn't even consider the, let's just say, consequences of his actions when he just admits guilty to something, and then bada bing, bada boom, he gets the executioner's blade immediately, and then has to fight Higuruma without his curse technique. Which would, admittedly, now it's weird though, we don't know how Higuruma's domain interacts with those who don't have a fleshly form? Now, unless he starts using domain against Kenjaku's cursed spirits, we'll never know. Because Sukuna has fleshly form. But, like, if confiscation happens to Mahito and he loses control of his cursed energy, does his form kind of just melt? I don't know. Actually, I have genuinely no idea. But essentially, Mahito wouldn't have his technique. His technique is what allows his immortality. Yeah, Higuruma would just mallet him to the end of the earth, presumably. Unless you think Mahito just has better stats than Higuruma, which is possible, considering Higuruma's grade 1 stats. Then again, I don't know. It's weird, depending on the cursed energy stuff. But Mahito should be able to harm or be harmed by Higuruma after the conditions of a domain specifically. Very specifically. And this is just a general thing. Anyone can harm Nanami. Where did Nanami come from? Where did Nanami come from? Still got Nanami on the mind. The recent episode got me feeling some type of way. But regardless, Mahito should be able to be harmed by anyone post-domain because the technique is shut down. That post-domain fatigue should go absolutely crazy. But the big number of people who actually can come in and harm Mahito simply because of the nature of how Mahito can be harmed, it's a lot more than you think. So I'm just going to start listing off characters, and then I'll explain why they all could harm Mahito in one way or another, and then bring up the question of how far certain things extend due to the lack of understanding that we have of Mahito and his durability and how it interacts with things that people launch off, based on Itadori's own lack of ability to use any ranged projectiles. Though presumably, it's a pretty simple answer that we'll get to in a second. But characters like Reggie, characters like Uro, characters like Ryu, characters like Kashimo, characters like Yorozu, characters like Kenjaku, characters like... We actually don't know if Urume is incarnated or not. We have no... I'm not sure if that's confirmed. We don't even know their gender. So I'm not sure if we can really say if Urume is incarnated or not. Or I see a common fan theory going around, especially in my comment section, that, like, a lot of people just believe Urume, like, Walt Disney himself and just froze hard for like 1,000 years and then told Kenjaku to wake him up when Sukuna was finally about to be incarnated, and then that ended up happening. So if you think that happened, then Urume's not on this list. But essentially, any reincarnated sorcerer, Hazanoki, maybe that one claw guy, any reincarnated sorcerer, Hana, any reincarnated sorcerer should be able to harm Mahito. And you may be like, Pencil? What you talking about, dog? And don't get me wrong, Angel's an entirely separate thing that I'll talk about in a second, but for characters like Ryu, for characters like Uro, for characters like Kashimo, the reason they're all able to just harm Mahito with pretty much all of their attacks is because they all are suppressing a separate soul to exist. Remember, when Kashimo fell, it wasn't just Kashimo, it was the poor guy that he incarnated into. When Ryu got 3-pieced by Sukuna with no drink or any sort of biscuit, yeah, guess what? That wasn't just Ryu, it was the person that Ryu incarnated into. Same thing with Uro. When Rika ripped off Uro's arm, it wasn't just Uro's arm, it was Uro's arm plus the person she incarnated into. Every single Culling Game sorcerer very specifically suppresses the soul of the original person, which is the exact thing that Yuji Itadori does in reverse. And what Sukuna is doing right now with Megami. Remember, the way that Yuji's conception and understanding of souls and the ability to subconsciously attack the souls works is simply because he's suppressing a second soul inside him. That's how Mahito explains it. Thusly, every reincarnated Killing Games player would be able to be like, I'm just going to hit you. And then the hits would actually do damage because of how their soul situation is set up. Do I think characters like Reggie beat Mahito? That's another video for another time. That's another video for another time. But in all reality, he should be able to harm Mahito. And notably, any cursed energy infused attacks should actually still be able to harm Mahito. Most likely. Reason I say this is because we see things like Divergent Fist have an effect on Mahito, and we know that specifically because of cursed energy lag from Yuji Todori. But the question is, does that come from cursed energy delay? And does that cursed energy actually harm Mahito's soul or not? I think it does. I think it does. I'm going to lean towards it does. And thusly, things like Thin Icebreaker, things like Granite Blast, things like Kashimo's Lightning Bolt, things like Reggie's Houses, like, they couldn't actually just do real damage to Mahito because they're all born of the cursed energy of someone who subconsciously understands the contours of the soul as they are actively suppressing them. The active suppression of souls is confirmed by Angel, who's in a symbiotic relationship with Hana, which is a similar yet not similar situation to what Yuji's in. And thusly, every single reincarnated player would be able to Mahito in terms of just simply doing damage. Wouldn't exactly insta-execute for the case of some of them. It's not all of them. I think it would take a second or a couple of hits. But it's not entirely impossible. Another character who may just be able to, you know, get Mahito out the way without the fact that they're a dual soul being is Angel. I kind of glazed over the fact that Jacob's Ladder just erases evil spirits. And don't get me wrong, the ethics of curses versus humans is one of the biggest and most ever central debates to Jujutsu Kaisen, especially in the early series before we just start fighting a whole bunch of sorcerers. But Mahito is a spirit, and he is kinda evil. So thusly, something like Jacob's Ladder, which is revealed to be a maximum technique in the redraws of chapter 217? So I forget which chapter it is. Let me double check, since I like to be factually correct when I can. And sometimes still end up factually incorrect when I'm trying to be factually correct. Let me see. I believe it's the redraws of chapter 213. Yep. Where it's revealed that Jacob's Ladder is a maximum technique. It is very specifically meant to erase evil spirits. That is actually later confirmed in chapter 221, where Hana's worried that she accidentally erased Gojo because he was an evil spirit. Thusly, the holy light of Jacob's Ladder would simply annihilate Mahito. Doesn't help that it turns off curse techniques too, so the main thing, not only is he a cursed spirit, which would insta-give him by the nature of Jacob's Ladder, but also, well... techniques turned off, buddy. You get vaporized. So thusly, Mahito stands absolutely no chance against Angel. Angel would be able to do more than damage and literally likely erase Mahito from existence. A questionable character that could harm Mahito, which is funny because they wouldn't be able to do it at first, but they would adapt very quickly unless you think the RCT Blade would do it. Mahoraga. It's weird because maybe it doesn't work, but unfortunately, once again, due to the fact that Mahito is such a strictly early series character, and due to how rare the ability is, remember, only 3 characters in the entire series have this ability, at least 3 that are confirmed. Technically, well, if you think, since Mahito's a cursed spirit, thusly he's formed of cursed energy, and he's weak to RCT like all other cursed spirits, Shoko would be able to harm Mahito, because she can emit RCT. So can Sukuna, and so can Yuta. But that's the question of whether or not you think that's effective on Mahito. If you think it is, then guess what? Shoko one-taps Mahito. Do with that what you will. But if not, then it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for Mahoraga. The easiest solution for Mahoraga is that the Sword of Extermination just taps Mahito on the head, and Mahito goes, and then he gets immediately one-tapped. Sukuna believes that if he was a curse, still same levels of power and everything, if he was a 15-finger curse variation of himself, say he was a 15-finger curse bearer for one reason or another, that single downward slash from Mahoraga would have erased him from existence. And don't get me wrong, I love gassing up Mahito as much as the next guy, but he's not 15-finger level as a curse. And thusly, he could get one tap by that. But even if you think for some reason or another that Mahoraga would not be able to beat Mahito with just the RCT blade, the Sword of Extermination, then he would just adapt. He would legit just adapt. He would really reset after Mahito tries to Auto Transfiguration him. He would simply keep hitting Mahito and be like, wait, hold on a second. I got this one. And eventually tap Mahito out of existence. Could you argue that falls under the beating Mahito up out of existence argument? Yes, because it would take a little bit, but it's Big Daddy Mahoraga. It wouldn't take that long. Another character who may actually be able to harm Mahito, though it's weird on whether or not they can. Yuta and Rika, they're a weird duo, because technically Yuta is a single-souled being, and technically Rika is a zero-souled being, though admittedly the dregs of Rika Oriental's soul are still there, as mentioned within the Sendai battle. So, if you think they both count as their own individual soul entities, they would need to copy Auto Transfiguration to do anything to Mahito, or wait until post-Domain Fatigue. But if you think that they count as a soul manipulating duo, since Yuta subconsciously, once again, remember, to be able to harm Mahito, you don't actually have to be consciously aware of the contours of the soul, you just have to subconsciously know what it is, which Yuta would do. He knew it at 5 years old, he likely knows it now. And Rika being the result of consistent soul manipulation, it's likely they could harm him too. And obviously, if you don't think that works, but you think RCT works, Yuta just spits in Mahito's mouth. Well, he probably wants to do more than spit in Mahito's mouth. Yuta is a down atrocious curse kisser. But with that being the case, he would grab Mahito and then Mahito's head would explode. Because of RCT. Not anything else, I promise. Hi, this is Editing Pencil. I'm from the future, but the past, since this is always in this weird nebulous time-space. I completely forgot about Nobara's resonance. Just like now. Just like Kiki completely forgot about Nobara. But with that being the case, resonance should also work. Though admittedly, I'm not sure if resonance would work instantaneously. Like, is it only because it was a clone? Or if Nobara got any piece of Mahito and then attached it to a straw doll and then, wha-bam! Then the resonance would resonate and do the baba do the baba. And then the damage would do the damage. I'm gonna assume the latter because Nobara deserves something. Because she hasn't gotten anything in like a long time. She hasn't even gotten the dignity of a gravestone. Like legitimately, I don't know. But yes, Nobara with her resonance technique is another character within Jujutsu Kaisen who can harm Mahito. I wanted to throw this one in there. Still, feel free. If I missed anybody else, let me know. Comment section down below. See ya. And I believe that's everything within the series that can genuinely harm Mahito. Anyone who's dual-souled, so it's just essentially all reincarnated Culling Games players, anything that directly attacks the soul, such as the Soul Split Katana, Shock Horror, that would do damage. Anyone with an extremely unorthodoxly powerful soul like Ryomen Sukuna, just hard counter Mahito by existing, I guess. Bada bing, bada boom. And also any sort of techniques or weapons that specifically deal in shutting off curse techniques. Whether that be tubes infused with symbol domain, whether that be the inverted spear of heaven, or whether that be a technique like Jacob's Ladder. Those are all the abilities, all the weapons, all the tools that can damage Mahito. So, hypothetically, I have a question for you. How do you guys think Mahito does in the Culling Games, running around and dealing with every single opponent that Yuji, Megumi, Yuta, and Akari, and even Maki had to encounter? Let me know down below. Also, if you made it all the way to the end of this chunker of a video, please do me a favor and leave Mahi no. Literally just Mahito, but instead of toe at the end, replace it with no. Mahi, no, because we're having all the characters and things that can actually get Mahito up out of here in this video. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support for as low as count them $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You can also now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get these same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the next Jujutsu Kaizen chapter. I want to thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I honestly hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Wakanda Plays, Red Wolf 4765, and Burp Skills. I'd like to give another very big thank you to our $5 patrons, Sean, Midnight Gemlord, Kevin, and Demex LND. And I'd like to give a fat, hefty thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Uchiha, Joaquin, and Idemokami. And I'd like to give another hefty, thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. And another big fat scrumdiddlyumptious thank you to our $25 patrons, Igneal and Calvin Elder.